Thank you, thank you. You are far too kind. I am John Brockway. Thanks for joining me in week 3 of my video blog, and let's delve right into the topics. First up is the biggest story of the weekend, which of course would be the National Football League Championship games. Well, let's start with the AFC Championship game, which was first between the Ravens and the Patriots. I thought it was a very interesting game in that Tom Brady was off, missing some wide open guys, really didn't play to the level that we're accustomed to seeing him play in big time games. I actually thought that Joe Flacco, who was catching a lot of grief coming into the game, I thought that he outplayed Brady. I thought that the Ravens' inability to get the running game sustained for a long periods of time, I think really hurt them. Their defense played solid enough to be able to win the game. And of course, the field goal kick at the end of the game, it's just a heartbreaker. The Ravens really, they kind of blew the game more than the Patriots won it. In the NFC Championship game, the 49ers and the Giants, this was another great game. The Giants threw the ball all over the place. They didn't really even try to run the ball for big parts of the game, for large parts of the game. The 49ers, what can I say? Their offense sputtered. They hit a couple of big plays, Alex Smith to Vernon Davis for a couple of touchdowns. But other than that, the offense was pretty anemic. The running game was pretty solid, but not enough. I feel that they got away from it a little too much. In key situations, they decided to try to throw the ball instead, and Alex Smith was incapable of doing it in this game. The Giants, kind of like the Patriots, were kind of given the game at the end as the 49ers uncharacteristically had a second turnover on special teams. Kyle Williams, who was filling in for an injured Ted Ginn, really didn't help his cause to be considered a punt returner in the future and really hurt the team. But kudos to the Giants being able to make the big plays when needed to and not have the mistakes like the 49ers did. So now we look towards Super Bowl 46, and it's a rematch between the Giants and the Patriots. If you want my information, my analysis on that game, be sure to check out my blog on SpadoraOnSports.com. It's time for our Tell Me He Didn't Just Say That quote of the week, and it comes from Ravens safety Ed Reed, who had a quote about his own team, about Joe Flacco, and about the Ravens offensive line and how they played in their game against the Houston Texans in the playoffs. Ed Reed said, quote, "I think Joe was kind of rattled a little bit. The Texans had a lot of guys in the box on him, and I mean, they were getting to him. He can't play like that." Come on, Ed Reed. Tell me he didn't just say that. Thankfully for Joe Flacco, he actually was able to shut up all his critics and play pretty well in the AFC Championship game. Unfortunately, they didn't come out with the win, as we already spoke about, but it wasn't because of Flacco. He threw for over 300 yards and made some big-time plays down the field. Ed Reed didn't really show up too much in the game, made a couple of deflections, but I was glad to see that Joe Flacco was able to shut up some of the critics, even on his own team. Let's take a look at the NBA season right now. We'll go through the standings real quick. In the Eastern Conference, you have the Chicago Bulls, who have the best overall record in the NBA at 15-3. Right now, they sit atop the conference. Going down, you'll have Orlando as the 2. Indiana is the 3 seed right now. Then the Sixers, the Hawks, the Heat, the Celtics, and the Cavaliers. And the Western Conference, a team with the number 1 seed and the best record at 13-3 would be Oklahoma City. And then from there, you go Denver, the LA Clippers, Memphis, Utah, the Lakers, the Spurs, and the Mavericks. One thing that I think is the most noticeable so far in the NBA season is that this Titans schedule has really taken effect on older teams because so many games being played in such a tight window, they're not really able to sustain the energy and be able to get up game after game, where some of these younger teams are using their youth and athleticism and able to bounce back a little bit quicker, and they're able to help their teams be a little bit more successful. I think that you're seeing a lot of lower scoring games as well this year because teams aren't so used to traveling as much as they are, as quickly as they are, and having to play as many times during the week as they have been. So I think it's an interesting NBA season right now. And then, one of the overriding stories in the NBA is the Dwight Howard saga. Will the Magic trade him? Will they not? It's a risky proposition when you're the Magic. It's almost a lose-lose situation. If you trade him before the trade deadline, you're giving up on a season in which you're currently 11-4 and the second best record in the Eastern Conference. If you wait until after the season, he's kind of been wishy-washy about his demands on whether or not he'll actually stay or go. Seems that he's leaving Orlando for a bigger market, maybe go with the Nets to Brooklyn or possibly LA or something like that, maybe even Dallas. Um, it's hard to say what the Magic should do. In my opinion, as long as they're winning, I would keep them and see if you could convince them, maybe make a deep run into the playoffs. I think that's their best hope because I'm not sure there's a package good enough in return for Dwight Howard. Let's talk a little college basketball now, and we're about 3/4 of the way through the regular season, about 6 weeks until Selection Sunday. It's been an interesting college basketball season. Right now, I'd say the strongest conference is the Big Ten. From top to bottom, there's no easy wins in that conference. The Big East has kind of had its ups and downs, but it's starting to get a little bit stronger as they get deeper into conference play. But they really didn't have too many great non-conference victories, so it's hard to tell the strength of a lot of those teams. Of course, you had Syracuse, who was the number one team in the country, suffering their first defeat of the season against Notre Dame, and they're probably going to struggle until they figure out what's going on with Fab Melo as well, who will definitely not play in Monday night's game against Cincinnati. I think the SEC is also a pretty strong conference. You've got teams like Florida and Kentucky and Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and a few others that make it a pretty solid conference. So I think a lot of good mid-major schools this year. I think BYU's transition rather to the West Coast Conference has given that conference three solid teams along with Gonzaga and St. Mary's. The Atlantic 10 is solid. The Conference USA is solid. Some of the smaller ones like the Colonial, the Ivy League even pretty decent this year. So it's very well spread out throughout college basketball this season. I think that there's no exact dominant conference. I think that there's going to be a very topsy-turvy NCAA tournament this year. Time to get to our top 5 games and picks of the weekend. Starting on Monday night, as Syracuse will travel to Cincinnati. The Orange coming off a loss against Notre Dame where they were exposed. Their 2-3 zone was exposed. Notre Dame shot well from the 3 and were able to out-rebound the Orange. Cincinnati coming off a loss to West Virginia and an overtime thriller. I like Cincinnati at home in this game. They have some great shooters, and I think they'll be able to penetrate the zone of Syracuse as well. On Wednesday night, we have a good game in the Big Ten Conference between Indiana and Wisconsin. Indiana can score a little bit more frequently than Wisconsin, who likes to play a more slowdown pace, so I'll take the Hoosiers on the road at Wisconsin. Then on Saturday, we've got 2 great games. Once again, Syracuse. This time they'll be at home playing against West Virginia. West Virginia, probably the current Big East, the current favorite for Big East Player of the Year, and Kevin Jones is having an outstanding season. He should give the Orange fits, but at home, I think Syracuse is going to be almost impossible to beat. And then also on Saturday, you have a good battle in the SEC between Mississippi State and Florida. Some of the big guys from Mississippi State should give the Gators a hard time, and D. Boss is an outstanding shooter, so I like Mississippi State on the road in this game. And then also on Sunday, a great rivalry matchup, although we think of it more in football, but Ohio State hosting Michigan. 2 teams, obviously, we know the history between the 2 universities. Michigan has some great shooting on the outside. Ohio State's more of an inside-out team, but I like the Buckeyes at home to be able to pull out the win. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's video blog. Thanks for joining me. Once again, I'm John Brockway. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do. And if you want to read more about my NFL analysis for the Super Bowl and some other interesting things, log on to SpadoraOnSports.com or read my print blog.